Hello, it's Leah Tindale joining you again for Note to Self. Thank you so much for your company. Before we get started today, I do just want to thank everyone who has been listening and following and sharing all the podcasts that I've been putting out. Yeah, this is the second year of the pod, and it's more tiring than one might think because I'm doing it outside of work. It's a extra passion project, something that I'm trying to continue to build. But it definitely can get a little bit, like, oh, what's the point? So if you are enjoying the podcast, I'd really love any encouragement you can give by the way of hitting follow. Come and follow me on Instagram, on YouTube as well. You can find it there if you haven't already. And then, of course, on Spotify, and then share it. It really does mean a lot when you can share the video amongst your network. And hopefully this can continue to sort of grow and we can find a community of people who want to chat and grow and become better by gleaning knowledge off each other. And yeah, you never know where it might take us from there. So yeah, any comments, any feedback you've got for me, always open for it. I'll always love to hear from you. So please do get in touch before I give up completely, which may just happen. If you're watching along today, you'll notice that I'm back in the studio. But today I want to talk all about divorce. So that's fun. I haven't actually really brought it up in detail as its own episode as of yet. We've sort of touched on it here and there. My sister brought up elements. I've had other guests, Meredith Benson, on before talking about it in terms of parenting and what that can look like. So if you haven't seen that episode, I really encourage you to check that out. That's in season 1. But I want to talk to you about some note to self that I've sort of come across over my divorce separation journey. I am now engaged, which is wild. I remember when I first was even thinking like, oh no, this is the end, like I might have to separate and then what will happen? One of the big things is you think you're never going to find love again. Like no one will ever love you again, which is wild. I mean, I know even before you find a first person to fall in love with, often you think no one will ever love me. And then you do and you're like, whoa, this is crazy. And then so to think that there'd be a second person feels pretty wild as well. So if you're in that headspace, I just want to encourage you that there is definitely someone who will love you because you are absolutely perfect and the right fit for somebody out there. It's just a matter of finding them. But there are so many milestones and things that can trip us up along the way. And I think the first note to self that I really want to bring to the table is the fact that by the time someone may be telling you that they're getting a divorce or they're getting separated, they have done a lot of mental hoops jumping, a lot of mountain climbing, I suppose, a lot of conversations. Ideally, they've spoken to their partner a lot. I know in some cases that's not the case. In more serious sort of domestic violence situations, that's definitely not going to be the case because you just need to leave and look after yourself. But in my instance, yeah, there was a lot of conversations before the decision to leave. There was definitely a lot of internal warring that went on for a really long time. And one of the things that I noticed when I started to tell people that I had left or was about to leave in that season was people sort of were saying like, oh, are you sure? Like, have you thought about it? And I tell you what, I know every single person who had that response was very well-meaning. And that's the thing. All these things usually come from the most beautiful, well-meaning people. But can I just encourage you not to say that? Because no one goes into a marriage wanting to get divorced. No one then steps into the process of separation and divorce lightly. Everyone has the dreams of wanting to have a successful marriage, go the distance, be 40 years and grow old together. And so when you say, are you sure? Even though, yeah, you might be just wanting to check, that they've thought about all the options and what's out there, it can feel really demoralizing and it can make you feel like not a safe person for that person who is telling you what they're up to, because I think it is already such a big decision to get to that point. So that's just a little first note to self there for someone if someone's going through that, because sometimes it is hard to know what to say for someone who's going through a separation and divorce. The other thing that my encouragement would be if you do have a friend or loved one going through something like this is try not to ask them, oh, have you talked to him about that? Because that also can be really demeaning. I know what you're saying. Like, I think there are a lot of people out there who made not have good communication with their spouse. And so therefore by the end of it, you're thinking, okay, well, maybe if you don't have good communication, you should just start with good communication, which technically is a great tip. Anyone out there in a relationship can tell you that's the hardest part of it. It's mastering it and trying to figure out how you can communicate better and learn and grow in that space. So that's sort of to note to self for anyone who is helping someone go through a divorce or separation, and you want to be there in a beautiful way, but those two things, try and avoid that if you can. But the other ones then are more for the person who's going through the big journey. And I think for me, I really wrestled with a lot of shame and guilt during this process. So my journey was a very long and drawn out one. And it was one where I got to a very desperate place and had no other option. And so I pulled the separation as a kind of a shake up, thinking, oh, hopefully we'll separate and we'll get back together. And then sadly, in my case, that wasn't able to be rectified and we weren't able to get back together. And whether or not you have that in your mind when you're leaving or when you're, walking through it, that's not something that that's not their situation, and I understand that, so that may not be relevant for you. But I kind of just want to talk about the shame piece, because I think it is all encompassing, and I think a lot of times we don't do things because we're worried about what other people will think, and we're worried about what will that look like? And then you have the piece of, well, what if I don't find anyone to love me again? Or what if this is because I'm so broken that, and so then this is just a proof of that. So I guess I want to encourage you, first of all, that there is nothing shameful about getting a divorce. And even for me, that's hard for me to say right now, because I still wrestle with that sometimes, that I'm now going into a second marriage or going to get married again with this baggage. And it shouldn't be baggage. It shouldn't be a failure. But I know that we still carry that, don't we, of like the ideal would be to stay married to this one person and you live in this fairy tale life forever. But unfortunately, we're all imperfect, and we have to continually both come to the party as a couple over and over again in the various iterations of ourselves that we find ourselves. And it is harder to do that, and we aren't given the tools to do that either. It's hard for me to even encourage you to not feel shame, because I know that's so easy for me to say on the other side when I've done it. But when you're in it and it's really weighing on you, it can be really, really hard. So I just want to encourage you that you're not alone, that those feelings are so, so normal. And it's hard then also to try and figure out what the truth is and what you really need to do to look after yourself and for your future, and if whether or not there is hope in that relationship or not. Sometimes when the framework or lens of shame or guilt is there, because for me, it's very hard to see through that. That's a very foggy place. So if you can put that aside and then work through the rest of it, I don't know how to do that, but if you can, give me your tips. And then, I just encourage you to try and be kind to yourself in that space, especially if you've come from a very sort of religious or Christian background. There still is that huge stigma about divorce. I had a friend say to me once, I had a little divorce party, it was like way after I got divorced. I think it was maybe 3 years after I got divorced, but I finally felt in myself I wanted to celebrate the new chapter of what was happening in my life. And my friend said to me, like, I don't know if I can come to your divorce party because I'm not comfortable celebrating divorce. Which I think is a really sad reflection on what is happening in that situation, because I don't want to celebrate divorce. I'm not advocating for that at all. I think it's very sad. It's very heartbreaking. It's hard and horrible. And then when you've got kids involved, it really changes, where the trajectory of things, the financial implications. No one is celebrating that. But I can celebrate somebody who's choosing themselves for the first time, or getting out of a bad situation, or crafting a life for themselves that they weren't able to do earlier because they had a different set of morals or values thrust upon them. And so it's an interesting reflection, because I think that does show just that some of the population still has that view set when it comes to divorce. And it's funny as well, like I'm a child of divorce. Both of my parents are divorced. Both my parents are divorced multiple times, but they're both very strong Christians. They're both very strong in their faith. It's very important to them. So you'd think that I wouldn't have these sorts of associations, but it still lingers, I think, that, yeah, marriage is the ultimate and divorce is the failure, and a failure of the people involved. And I don't think it is necessarily a failure. I think my mindset on divorce has definitely changed. That's another big note to self, I think, that I've had. Sure, it's not the ideal, but it can be a powerful growth tool for you if you let it and if you lean into the change. The other thing that I find really encouraging, and this is not just about divorce, but also about a lot of big life-altering shifts that we can go through. They are not something that I'd wish on anybody, right? Like they are life-changing and rupturing things that can happen to a person. But the good side and the silver lining is the person that you find on the other side of such grief, like that, I can't even explain it. If you're listening and you're going through some sort of heavy grief, you may not even fully appreciate this yet until you're on the other side, because sometimes it's just so overwhelming. But their grief allows us, I feel, access to a part of ourselves and a part of sort of humanity that is so raw, so unfiltered, and allows you to connect in with a true version of yourself that isn't operating by any other facades. So for me, when I got divorced, that really started to pull at the thread of a lot of other things, of being like, okay, well, if I'm a divorced woman, can I be a Christian? If I'm a divorced woman, does Jesus love me? Like things like that, because faith was so important to me. And I think when you start really pulling at the fabric of who you are in that way, you then unraveling everything, all of my life sort of started unraveling as well. Everything that I stood for, all the pillars that I thought, yeah, these are my values, this is what I hold dear, they all started unraveling. And as a result, even though I hadn't rebuilt anything yet, what I was left with was the core of who I am, my essence, if you will. And this is something that I think is so special, because it's really hard to find out your core self sometimes when we're so used to people pleasing or living in a space of survival, or trying to figure out, what we're going to do, or like, so there's so many things that we try and do, whether we have masks, whether we are just trying to fit in. And when you are in so much pain and agony, that all those things fall away, and the only way you can live is because you're guided by your true inner self, your true light. That is a beautiful thing. That is a horribly painful thing. And I really hope that you can find that without going through all the heavy stuff. But for me, that was my experience. That was the case, and that was what I discovered. It was the silver lining and the gold thread of the time of me being divorced. The other note to self that I wanted to talk about was a huge one on being kind to yourself. When I first got separated and then I was officially divorced and I started dating again, I dated all sorts of different people. And a lot of times now in reflection, I think, why did I go on a date with them? Like, I have no idea. And I think in reflection, I was very hurt. I was very lonely. I was really grappling with so many feelings inside, that it was better to be with somebody than to be alone. And so as a result, yeah, I hung out with people that I probably shouldn't have hung out with, and, took risks that I probably shouldn't have taken those risks. And sometimes now I can find myself catching up, myself thinking, oh, why did I do that? Whatever. But I think in those moments, you need to be really kind to yourself, both afterwards, if you have any regrets, and during it, if you do catch yourself being like, why am I doing this? Because grief and big life-altering ruptures like divorce, any kind of loss, really, you're just trying to get your bearings again. And sometimes we do things out of survival that maybe aren't the best, but they are survival mode. And because you're operating in that place, I think it is really important to give yourself some grace. And obviously try and be safe. I do encourage that. But don't beat yourself up for what you needed to do in the times of survival and in just getting through. And I wish I could have been more gracious to myself in that time. I also do wish I knew what I was doing. I think I had no experience of grief and sadness on this level before, so I didn't know what was happening and why I was all of a sudden wanting to be really busy and be out every night and all of those sorts of things. So if you can catch yourself that that's also what you're doing as a coping mechanism. Not everybody does that, obviously, but for me, that was something that I found myself doing. So if you are also finding yourself in that space, then and you can catch it, I would encourage you to do the opposite, even though you probably really, really don't want to, because it feels a lot worse. But it might save you some different kind of grief later on if there are decisions that you aren't quite happy with. But go easy on yourself and be kind to yourself. It's such a tough spot. I don't ever want to get divorced again. I don't ever really want to experience a grief like that again, to be honest. I think that's absolutely awful. And I'm very lucky. I haven't had a lot of other loss in my life. I still have a lot of my loved ones with me. And so far it's been great that type of grief hasn't touched me, but it is still such a big grief. And I think all of those really they sort of just stay around, don't they, for a really long time. And I've had friends that have gone through different iterations, whether they have been divorced, whether they were separated for a bit and then got back together, whatever their journey has been. Maybe they're still with their partner and they're just working through different things. But I think it's also really important to know that nobody's relationship is perfect and everyone has got opinions and advice for what they would do in your situation. But the reality is no one knows but you. No one knows what it truly is like behind closed doors between you and your partner. And I just would love to, encourage you that you're not alone. A lot of the things that you're going through is very, very similar. I don't know if these are helpful notes to self. I think it probably would be more interesting to share all the stories as a result of my divorce, which would be more entertaining. And perhaps if we do a spin-off one day, that will be the case and we'll be able to talk about them more. But in this format, I guess, I just want to really encourage you to be kind to yourself, to try and remove that shame and guilt there, because from me, I'm letting you know that I'm not putting any of that on you at all. And if I can encourage you to walk in that space of freedom of not having shame and guilt, I would really encourage you, because I think you'll have a more transformative experience as you move through your grief and as you process. And then, if you are supporting someone who's going through a divorce or a separation at the moment, just that little reminder once again, try and pick your words. Try not to say, have you spoken to them, or have you thought about this? Are you sure? Things that would be really helpful if you are looking for something to do. For me, I really appreciated people just turning up and hanging out. That probably was the biggest thing. When people pulled away, that amplified the shame that I was already feeling. Sometimes I think I have lost friends because of it. I'm not entirely sure. I could be projecting because you just don't know, right? But it's hard, especially if you had couple friends, and then it's tricky because they're like, well, who do we hang out with? Or there's a lead. Like it gets so messy. It gets so messy. But I think just be there, show up for them. Like lots of people think, oh, well, maybe you should just do this, or maybe you're not X, Y, Z. But at the end of the day, if they've already made that decision and that is, and they are separated and they are getting a divorced, the best thing you can do is be there and go allow that person to share what they need to share, to do the silly things that they need to do, and to not panic. Let them grieve, let them go through that process. And you'll probably find a really incredible version of your friend on the other side that you didn't know was possible. So I don't know if that is helpful. Maybe it is, maybe it's not, but that's a little bit of insight of the divorce world and the divorce note to self that I've had so far. There's so much. I could talk about this for a very long time because it was the biggest rupture of my life. It has completely changed everything about me, and it put me on a different trajectory career-wise, and sadly, it's probably the greatest decision I've ever made. And I hate saying that, to be honest, because I do still hate that I'm divorced. And I can't help, though, the fact that everything brilliant I have now in my life is because of a result of that decision. So that's a hard juxtaposition to be in. And if you're in the same spot, I feel you. It's weird. It's very hard to explain to people. I think it forced me to grow up, forced me to become me. as well. So there you go. There's a little tidbit. Let me know, what you think. And if you've got questions, I'd love to hear from you. If you've got questions about my life or divorce or anything particular that you really need insights and help for or anything like that, I really want to build this community, like I said at the beginning, to be there for each other, to talk about these sorts of big, hard stuff and to have some laughs along the way as well. So yeah, do get in touch. Send me a message, comment, follow. I'd be so, so grateful. And thank you for all your support so far, for everyone who's listening and sharing. You're absolute superstars. On Note to Self with me, Leah Tindale.